Hi, everybody. Very nice to see you. This all-female round. I like it. Yeah, very nice to see you all, but I'm mostly very excited to have Joszi here with us today. Did I pronounce it all right now? Okay.
Joszi.
Joszi. So I have to say that when Frida and I were kind of brainstorming about who else besides the people who are already very active in the network or members in Die Gemeinschaft we should invite, we kind of quickly came to this wonderful woman because we met, or at least I remember her work from around 10 years ago when I lived and studied in Italy. And we both were at different slow food fairs, and Joszi and some of her colleagues organized some incredible stuff with the Slow Food Youth Network, and the Slow Food Youth Network from the Netherlands were always the coolest and the most beautiful people. We felt like the one with the most, like the coolest, really food activism around. And so I have been admiring her work and activism for a long time. So, so Joszi is a social geographer, a food activist and food entrepreneur now.
Yeah.
Working towards changing the food system.
Yeah. So my name is Joszi Smeets and I'm one of the founders of FoodHub. We enable people to change the world of agriculture and food. It's an education agency. And before that, I was involved in the Slow Food Youth Network in the Netherlands. And the question, like, how did I get into food is one that I ask myself a lot as well, to be honest. Because I'm not the daughter of a farmer, or I'm not, I had hospitality jobs, but it's not like I had like that moment there, like, this is my passion, I'm going to do this. At the end, if I have this conversation in my head, I think food for me at one point really felt like the right language to use to change the world. Big words maybe, but I think when I'm looking back, I mean, food was always at the essence of my family. When something important happened, we always gathered around the table, around good food. And I come from a line of small grocery shop owners and hotel owners. So I see that there's something of that in my veins, I guess. But my parents are both therapists. So there was always a lot of talking and a lot of human interaction in my family as well. And I was always a kid that was, already from a very young age, I was organizing debates or always trying to translate, like, for example, politics in a more, in a language that could interact with more people than that they reached at that point. Therefore I started studying social geography. And now looking back, I feel like I'm a real social geographer. Social geography in the essence means how people interact with space. Like the one thing that we do most compared to all the other species is agriculture. So it's actually really, I'm still really doing what my studies were for. But in university, I always felt like when we talked about globalism or about digitalism or all those isms, it felt so abstract to me. While I was looking for a more sense language or something that I could communicate in easier. And then when I attended the Food Film Festival, which was one of the first events that the Slow Food Youth Network organized in Amsterdam at that point, I think it was 2012. So I was in my early 20s. I was an organizer at a community cinema in Amsterdam. So I had to produce this festival. And I remember that on one day I was watching the film Jiro Dreams of Sushi. Then attended a debate about sustainable fishery in Europe. And then had a workshop making sushi from Dutch fish. And I was like, this is the language. This is it. This can be my instrument. So then I just got involved, and I think I was also very lucky that around that time there was a generation. I mean, there are still really cool young people now at the Slow Food Youth Network, but I feel that at that time was the beginning, and was also really about creating awareness, completely different debates than we have today here at this symposium. It was really still very awareness-based, and we were there at the right time with the right people, and we started building the movement. It was also the first youth network of Slow Food, so Slow Food found us very rebellious, and they didn't really know how to deal with us because we wanted to talk about everything, and we also included corporates and activists and everyone working in the whole food chain. So we were a bit of a weirdo,
but you had a very playful and fun way of doing it. I felt
we always celebrated food. Yeah. So that's how I got involved. Yeah. Long story short.
Yeah, no, I think it's very fascinating. I think it's especially also something really wonderful that we keep hearing here and experiencing here, that the food system and its problems are so complex that there's also not one easy fix. And I think the most wonderful thing here is also to see that there's so many different people with so many different backgrounds that are not all with a farming background, but they bring in their ideas into trying to change something, which maybe brings us also to the topic. As I said, the food system, its problems, it's so complex. There's no easy solution to just fix it. But where do you feel like, with your experience also, and using, as you said, food as a language or as a tool, what is a good start to change something from within in the food system?
Yeah, I think that's why I always bring an apple, because I feel like you're right. It's the most complicated issue of our time. It's about everything. And at the same time, it's this apple. It's super simple. Everyone eats. It's the language, it's the first thing that is into interaction between human beings. It's at the core of who we are. So the first thing is that you have the right instruments. I think that's already a really powerful realization, that working in food and agriculture is so at the essence of what we need right now. And then, I mean, going back to your question, how to start from within, I think that's for everyone completely different. So in the education that we make at FoodHub, we start with personal leadership. Well, actually, we start with what is change? How does change work? So that you have a kind of bird's eye view on what is going on. And then we spend a whole amount of time on personal leadership, so that people really mirror themselves and know, okay, I'm good. This is my passion. This is my background. This is what I can do, what I can't do, and so this can be my role. That means that I need people like that around me, and to have that mirror, I mean, that's not something that we learn in schools. And then we go on learning journeys and field trips and really get to know the system that you're part of. And then it's learning about, it's really about practical skills. So if you really want to be a change maker, you probably are, for example, already a baker, and you want to be a change maker in the bakery industry, then you also need certain skills to do that as a baker. For example, the skill of prototyping, the skill of how to use feedback loops, the skill of storytelling, the skill. I mean, there are very many change maker skills that are also not really taught in schools. Mm-hmm. And then go out there and be part of a network and a community as we are here. It's really based on Theory U. Maybe some of you know it. It's from Otto Scharmer at the MIT University and many other people around him. That's just the middle at the top of the pyramid of the change theory. But it's very much based on that theory, what we do. But actually in the beginning, we didn't know that. So we became more aware of what we were doing and then needed a theory to tell other organizations that that kind of education is necessary for change makers in food and agriculture.
Before we go deeper into that, can you maybe give an overview of what the idea of FoodHub is, how you started it, and what is your aim with it? You already said a little bit that you're trying to educate people to become change makers, but can you break it down?
Yeah, so it started also at the Slow Food Youth Network, because one thing that we did, which is I think still the most important thing of that network, is back then it was still called the Youth Food Movement, the Youth Food Movement Academy. And we brought 25 people yearly from all over the food chain with really different views on the future of food. So not like-minded at all. We really selected them because every year we had like 200 applicants and we just picked 25 of them. And we had this whole idea of the diversity of that group was at the essence of the selection. So we had people from corporate institutions, we had butchers, pig farmers, but also vegan activists and people from startups, people working with their hands, people working in science, governments, really from all over the food chain. You get what I mean? And we noticed that they actually never meet, though they are working on something that can only work when it goes through that whole chain of people working with it. It's like but apparently it doesn't work like that still. And with them as well, we learned in the beginning, we made up some rules, like how are we going to interact with each other, in a respectful way, because you can imagine when we would go for example, because after that we would have a 6-month program with field trips through the whole food chain. And we would not only show beautiful examples, but we would also go to a slaughterhouse or to a huge Barilla factory in Italy. And actually, just a disclaimer, you can also argue what is good and what is bad, but not only the slow food things. The most interesting conversation would happen, for example, between that vegan activist and that pig farmer at the sausage company. Like everything together and in a respectful way. It was really like, so we're actually we're not having a right or wrong conversation over here. And because there was so much interest in that academy, and also people from all over who wanted to know about the curriculum, and I was also really invested in the curriculum and how people learn. And so I'm a child from therapist, so I think I'm also like really into that human aspect of food. After a few years, when you don't feel so comfortable anymore with talking about yourself as a youth food movement, I was getting a little older and I was thinking, like, what am I going to do? We felt like that academy part of what we're doing that has so much more to offer. So we started an education agency. That's now 8 years ago. And in the beginning, it's also, I never started it to be an entrepreneur. And then, of course, all the entrepreneurial challenges happen to you because we have people working for us and we need funding and we need,
So this is now a company and not an NGO.
Yeah, we're with 15, it's a company. So we have clients and we do things on our own initiative. And we have 15 people working at FoodHub. And I'm one of them, so 15 including me. But we have I think 30 people who are like the experts and the trainers in our program. So we don't, I'm for example taking, I'm the teacher in the personal leadership part. But if we are going to talk a day about fisheries, we ask fishermen and people from that sector to come and talk.
When you have these more controversial conversations, you were saying about the vegan activist and maybe the butcher, how do you moderate this kind of conversation which I'm sure can be quite emotional, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think if you do something with such passion, may it be the activism for a meatless world, or on the other hand, for a craftsmanship that's kind of getting lost and doesn't have a lot of appreciation.
Yeah.
How do you deal with this?
Well, they all share a passion for food. So we start from their sharing parts. The parts that they share. And then, because we start with personal leadership and stuff, we also really talk a lot about how to have conversations with each other. So the act of dialogue, and we have conversation rules actually. Mm-hmm. And then at one point you also just act as a collective. So then you know each other, you know where you're coming from, and you have this collective goal of, for example, coming up with a solution for a certain food challenge, or just getting to know the food system. So then all the individual background is less important than the collective, like we are an academy year together, or we are now here at this symposium together as one. So that's a kind of craftsmanship in itself to create a group. Yeah.
So you were saying you also have all different kinds of clients, from very small farmers to producers, but also big companies. Yeah. I think we're here in quite the bubble, actually, of a lot of people. I mean, we heard your little stories, at least a little insight into what you do, and you could already feel so much passion, and you could hear the story of what you want to change. So I think all of us here are already there at the point that they want to change, but how do you go into...
But McDonald's wants change as well, right? Although that's what their marketing is telling you. So what is change?
Yeah, what is change? Or like, how do you also deal with these different motivations, maybe? That maybe sometimes with McDonald's, I don't know if I'm presumptuous, but also maybe it's mostly greenwashing what they
that's
would
actually
like
a client that we refused because they asked us to build an academy for them. That's the only one. We, for example, have a big project for Unilever. They're founded in the Netherlands, and they're all over the world, of course. It's also still, we're also having a lot of discussions internally of when do we say yes and when do we say no. And it's complicated. I think it's also something that we should talk about, actually, because I think you also work in a very broad spectrum. But we, I think it's really about, checking in and is this still doing good? And sometimes, you're wondering, and sometimes it feels super. I mean, I also want to do more than just with foodies talking about, everything should change. High five, and that's it. So,
but how do you make these decisions in your team, and what is
we talk
impact
a lot
for
about
you?
it. What's an impact?
I mean, where do you feel like, okay, yes, we're gonna do a project with Unilever, because I feel like if we achieve this and that, then we had an impact on them.
Yeah, because the people that, for example, with Unilever, we have an academy for all the young professionals that work in food and nutrition. So it started in the Netherlands, and now we're also going to organize that in the Nordics and in Germany. So it's really good to get to know some people from the Nordics to see what we're going to do there. But it's it's an awareness program. So we take them through the whole food chain, because those young people working there, they, for example, are working on a project about reducing food waste, but they've never been to a farm in their whole life. So we just take them on learning journeys through that food chain. And there we are actually now having some critical conversation, because we don't just want to be an awareness program and run nice school trips, but we also want to go in that, what I just explained, in that change maker part. So we're now actually trying to get them work on challenges that seniors gave to them. So we're all the time in conversation with that client, like, okay, is this really setting a tone? And I would never only want clients like that. It's the most corporate one, also the most, the one that we're most critical about. And another one is also, and I think it's also about the diversity of what we're doing, because at the other end of the spectrum, we initiated the New Farmers Family, which is really an accelerator for farmers to find new sustainable business models. And we create a family around that farmer that, work on that model together. So, and we made an introductory course about regenerative farming. And we see actually a lot of the students that apply for that course are people working at organizations from all over the food chain who don't have a clue what regenerative farming is, but now have funding and time to spend on it. And then I rather like the real regenerative farmers to tell them what regenerative farming is than their own bosses who maybe just started that project because that's a trending thing and we should work on it now.
Yeah, but I think it's really valuable because I feel like we do need the change from all different sides. And I remember our chemistry teacher, Marini, and she a food chemistry teacher. And I think we had so many people in our community who were very much into our slow food philosophy and very much wanted to start small farms and maybe small, bakeries or all these things. And she said that's all great and amazing and these places should exist, but we also should go into the really big companies and change something from within, because we will also inspire companies to do something different if we change the demand from consumers. But also we need to talk to the big guys. If we're just always these two worlds fighting against each other, there's not going to be a lot of collaboration or coming together. And I think it's also something I see now working for a quite large farm, because we work on 3,000 hectares, which is industrial level, if you want to say so. Yeah. At least 1,000 hectares is the crop production land. But also something that we are realizing is that only if we can show that we can scale up these sustainable land use models that we're trying to implement, like only if we can scale them up and also show that this works in really big scale, we can really change something. And I think, as I said, we need all change in all sizes, I believe. But I think it's also important to not exclude people from the conversation.
Yeah. And it's difficult because I think it's also, I completely agree, but it's also really important to realize that, for example, at Unilever, those people are still working in an organization entity that has one incentive, and that is to make the stakeholders as rich as possible. So the incentive that the whole entity of that company is built on is extractive, and at the core of what those young people, and now we're very zooming into this example, but they are individuals and they started working there, they studied sustainable food, and now they have a nice well-paid job at this company, but they are still you can still but I think it's really It is an interesting example because they're also young. They're not in a power position. So it's nice to tell that people we're Unilever, I'm the CEO, and we're doing a beautiful academy for young people. That's it. Now I'm going back to my palace again.
Absolutely. And I think that's always the question. The motivation, I think, to work with these companies is really good, but that's what I meant also being like, when do you feel like we made an impact? Because I think that's the question in the end. Can you really change these companies, or will they just use an amazing
I will give an
like
example
this?
Because I think so. Why do we work at them? Going back to that theory of change and that bird's eye view, it is the system we're in today. It is like most people get their food through that system, and most of the people here, I think, are at that bubble and working in that niche, new chains, creating new products, creating new ways of farming. And I have the feeling now that we're in that disruption phase. So the system in itself gets a lot of negative feedback. And before it was just like, oh yeah, that's awareness and let's go and create an organic brand or do something. But it now also, and that's still in that, and maybe I get a little bit too theoretical here, but we're still in that disruption phase. You're still in the organization of this system that we have now, and there are a lot of negative feedback loops in how they think as well. So if you just want to earn as much money as possible, but for example, the pesticides that you use, the price of the pesticides gets higher. The water that you use for your huge agriculture system, the price for the water gets higher. The soil that you use, the yield that you get from that soil is getting less and less. Mm-hmm. So in their way of thinking, they get negative feedback, and they feel like, okay, maybe it's just also in a capitalist way of thinking good to now change. And that's this disruptive part that's going on at the corporates. But for example, in the Netherlands, we have huge farmers' protests already for a few years now. So there's also disruption.
So, but you meant the motivation to change is still a capitalistic decision.
Definitely.
Okay.
But there is disruption going on there. That's why they ask us to do a program or like, so if you are looking from a bird's eye view and you see that disruptive phase, then what we really wonder is, okay, what do people need in that phase? Because it's a very scary time. There's a lot of burnouts and anxiety, and people want to make a change, but what do you need to do that in a company, but also outside a company? I think that is really where I decide to focus on, because if you're in that disruptive phase, I think real change can really happen, but you need the right skill set to do it, and the right people at the right time.
Can you make an example? Talking about maybe the apple farmer?
Yeah, the apple farmer, or maybe a different one, because being 15 years in this movement, it's the thing that I love the most is that you see some changes start super, super small and then grow, and now getting quite disruptive. I'm now thinking of Bart Gobe. He's a farmer in the east of the Netherlands, and he was one of the first farmers that was part of that new farmers family. And he was back then 27, and he's coming from a line of cow farmers. And his parents asked him to take over the farm. And his girlfriend back then was a really vegan foodie, and he was just very hesitant to do it because he was going to work with cows. He was born and raised on that farm, and his parents were also quite critical already. Like, is this a healthy way of, it's hard to be a farmer in the Netherlands, especially in the dairy industry. And his brother was studying in Wageningen University. So by coincidence, he had already a critical farmer's family around him in a way. And he was in the new farmer's family, really think like, am I going to take over this dairy farm? And if so, what do I want to change? And his scientist girlfriend was in a kind of study program at Wageningen University, huge university, part of the food system, where they were researching how to make the transition from grasslands for dairy farms to Dutch soy plantations.
Soy. Oh.
Yeah. So, many years later, he's now the first vegan dairy farmer in the Netherlands. How they do that on those grass fields is all documented, and there's lots of information about that. So, because we in the Netherlands, we have a lot of grasslands that are not very useful for making something else than grass. Yeah, I'm not the most technical person, but in terms of biodiversity, Dutch soy is of course not the best answer, but on those grasslands, also looking at what kind of nature could grow there are not many options. And they find a way of Dutch soy that is also very good for the carbon. Don't let me go into this technical conversation, but he is now part of a huge group of farmers transitioning to vegan dairy farming. And there's a market for it, obviously.
What does it mean, vegan dairy farming?
So
they make milk from soy?
He makes milk from soy.
Okay.
And they have their own Dutch local soy milk brand.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also first said he's vegan, but he still has the cows.
Oh
but
yeah, no, they actually just
a
few months ago they sold all the cows, so there's not one cow now at the farm. And that's not the solution for the dairy industry, but it is they build a whole new food chain around a whole new food product. And he got a lot of help from companies as well who funded it. And I think this is a transition that happened over 10 years. But there you really see through that whole, if you go to that bird's eye view, how connections and building a brand and building a chain and building a new business model together with people from different disciplines created a whole new area that I really didn't think of 15 years ago.
Yeah. So when you say to make a change, you need to connect all these people with the different skills. Can you say a little bit more how you would do that? So, for example, with this vegan dairy farmer, which skills did he have and which other skills did he get to in a different way? Or
well, he was really open to learn. He was really critical, I think, at his daily business. He got people from completely different disciplines involved in what he was doing. At the essence, that's it, I think. Yeah.
All right. I think we have some more time, but we would also like to include you a little bit in the conversation and open up the conversation. But I have one more question talking about change. If you could change one thing overnight in the food and agricultural scene, what would it be?
I think that if we wake up tomorrow, the indigenous knowledge that's inside of us all, that we're part of this world, has awakened again. I think if we would think from that ground principle, that systems would look completely differently.
Right.
Yeah. I think if there's one thing, I think that would be the most powerful thing.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts? Do you have any questions for Joszi, or thoughts generally about how to start change from within? What are maybe also your ways of changing in your company or in the hazelnut production, or Yes.
I'd like to hear a little bit about your background. I think we all shared, but
yeah, true. I skipped. So I'm originally from the north of Germany, and I moved to Italy and studied there at the University of Gastronomic Sciences, which was founded by Slow Food. That's also why the Slow Food Connection. And after university, I started an internship with Roman, actually, at Markt de Neun, and did a few different educational markets there, and in the end ended up working there for 4 years, and also doing communication and press there as well at these different education events. And we also did a lot of, during COVID, we started doing more and more cooking courses for kids as well, and going more into that education. And 2 years ago, I started working for Gut&Bösel, which is a regenerative farm in Brandenburg, 1 hour east of Berlin. And we're also trying to change a little bit the agricultural scene from what we can do, and inspire others to see the beauty of farming. So that's me. Any more questions?
I'm curious when you said vegan dairy, if there was discussion around whether to call it dairy or not, because you see that a lot in terms of alternative products. You then called it a new product in the market, yet it's using the term dairy.
They were in the middle of this discussion. Yeah, and so that's now, I think they also like changed it on their website. Coming from that whole dairy industry, they really understood the discussion as well and wants to respect that whole industry as well. So I think they don't even call it milk at this moment.
I also have another question. So I don't know how it is in the Netherlands, but in Germany we have these apprenticeship programs. So if you want to become a farmer or a butcher, a baker, and so on, usually go have a mix of theory and practical work where you go to school, but also are based in a bakery or a farm or whatever. And I'm wondering if you have a similar system as well, and if you also see a change in this sort of education, because I think in the end, that's also a goal, right? Yeah. That there has to be change in the educational program. Yeah. So at some point, maybe it won't even be needed so much to have these extra curriculum programs, maybe.
Yeah. So no, we don't have that. I just talked to a baker in the field.
Florian, probably.
Yeah, specifically about this thing, because it sounds really interesting and good to me, although he also told me about how industrial craftsmanship is also like owning that kind of guild system. But I think it's really what's really going on in the Netherlands as well is that lots of people who don't come from farmers' family want to farm and have great ideas and but no land and not the financial terms to. I mean, yes, some have, but very, very few. And I think, like the statement that was made I think his name was, the farmer that made the statement, like, we need more people in agriculture. That's where the whole idea of new farmers' families is built around. Because I think it is really all going back to that first moment of farming, and then we should build food change on their ideas. So we also really try to involve the farmers into coming up with new products, building new food change, because what we see a lot in the Netherlands is that other people do that and then try to rule that down on how farmers should change. That's also why you have so many farmers protests now in the Netherlands. And I think, I mean, there's definitely a lot of very stubborn farmers as well who just want things to stay as they are. But there are many, especially in the younger generation, so many people open for change, also just to have a healthy life, because it's not easy to be a farmer. And I think we need more and more and more farmers. I mean, it doesn't have to be so large scale. It can also ask for a lot of handwork and a lot of hours. If there are so many people in the city who could benefit from getting their hands dirty, and it's a craftsmanship, it's a skill. So I'm not saying that everyone can be a farmer, but I think I can imagine a agriculture system that can work.
And I'm sure there's also many frustrating moments because, I mean, it's a large system and it's also hard to change things. It takes a long time. But has there also been, in all your years of experience, also a moment that really motivated you or where you felt really empowered that, yes, a change can be possible?
Well, I think the community and the network in itself. So things can go really fast because we know so many people in all those different disciplines. So I feel more sometimes like a kind of agent for so many change makers, and I can connect them very quickly, or our events and communities can connect people in a very fast way. So the example of the vegan milk farmer, is just one of many that if you work in this movement for such a long time, you see growing and getting bigger and bigger. And at the same time, I mean, I'm not optimistic all the time. I have 2 young children, and I was at the A12 a few days ago with Extinction Rebellion, protesting against fossil fuels. So that's my schizophrenic identity. I'm working with Unilever, and I'm there at the road. So I don't know, but I still feel like, also just in a daily basis, I really love to work with food and with the people who work with food. And that's also, at the core of why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Wonderful. Yeah, and I think also, no, please, Steffi.
Which, like in your work or in this educational programs, do you have specific topics that you're focusing on that you see as like impact drivers? I don't know, planetary health or circularity?
Yeah, definitely. So regeneration is the biggest one at this moment. First it's always about system change. How does it work? Personal leadership, and then our learning journeys. I mean, some programs just have a few days or a little budget. So if I would like build the perfect academy, we would talk about food waste, regeneration, plant-based foods, plastic. It's a big one as well. And many, many more, I have to say. I cannot really choose. But I think they are at the essence of what we do, because then you also talk about politics, about health, about so many things. Yeah.
I hope it's not going to be too abstract.
Bring it on.
We'll try. So listening to you, I thought it was a very good reminder how hard it is to bring also different bubbles together, and because I guess it also resonates with me, because in my work I've experienced this a lot this year, like living in my bubble and meeting others. But I wonder, when you say like this place today is such a place of like we and kind of like pushing ourselves away from the other.
Yeah,
differentiating.
Yeah.
And I wonder, like, do we always use this kind of we, and is your work also about like creating new we's that before weren't there, or like is it because I wonder, like, do we always need to exclude also others to kind of mobilize this energy?
What do you think?
Well, I observe that here it works, mobilizing this energy. But I think that I just see now that it also excludes, and I'm just scared that maybe also this kind of it's putting too much into one bowl, but that it's like bad feelings of like racism, and maybe there's also some like some feeling giving back of being excluded, and like frustration that comes up by being excluded. I don't know. Maybe I'm just reproducing cliches.
No, I think it's a super important question, and I think it's also not like one answer and that's the answer for your whole life. I think sometimes it's really, and then I'm now talking about inclusion and exclusion on the way that you think of the future of food. Let's say so. So if you all agree, and I wonder if that's the case, but do you have to interact with people who have a completely different idea about that? And I think sometimes you don't, and sometimes you have to. But what I really notice around me is that we are ending up in so polarized conversations. So it's all those. There's this beautiful book from Charles Mann about eco-modernism versus the ecological viewpoints. And every discussion is about that, like a clinch of ideas and not a construction of new things that can work. And to construct you need to invite different thinkers. You need diversity, as in the soil. So, yeah, I really think it is important to know how to facilitate diversity so that it can construct together. Because you need facilitation for that. Otherwise, it will end up in a polarized conversation. And not only thinkers, but also doers. So sometimes you need that unnatural, which is actually very natural, but an unnatural environment, to create together. And that's something that we need to. That asks for action, because it doesn't happen if you don't create that environment.
I think that's really, really interesting. Just speaking from our experience at the farm, we do at least have a lot of age diversity at the farm. We are a traditional, mostly organic grain production crop farm. We have forestry, but now also these regenerative ideas and land use models. And I see so often that this diversity of different backgrounds from people who have worked at the farm for over 20 years, sometimes 25 years, who studied conventional agriculture, who know how to drive the big tractors, who know every little piece of land, which is quite a lot in this case, but also to have the people who studied organic farming, or maybe didn't even study at all, but just have so much experience from working and traveling all around the world and seeing these different models. It's our biggest strength, but also our biggest conflict. Yeah, it's so tough to bring these worlds together. And I think
so I didn't say it was easy or comfortable.
It's so uncomfortable often, because there's so many emotions involved, and people think that this is what I believe is right. This is what I've been taught. How is this wrong?
Yes.
And at the same time, like, why don't you understand me that putting a tree here is great, but then it's like, but where am I going to drive with the tractor because there's a tree in the way? Like, it's just
if you only surround yourself in settings like this, I mean, this is, I guess, for many of you, a very comfortable place. Good food, good people, good, same kind of ideas. Then you also get narrow-minded, and you maybe don't see solutions that are there already. And I actually, because I'm guilty of watching the Disney Plus series about your farm, and I remember the episode about the drones, like the about how technology and regeneration can be combined. And I think that's, for example, a big clash in the whole regenerative farming movement. That is actually, coming up with a solution. So if you overcome that difference that is there because of disciplines and ideas of skill, I guess, you can come up with new solutions. And I see that all the time happening around me.
Yeah, I think that's so true, because I also think there are all these skills also at the farm. I think if we just find a good way to communicate with each other, not just at the farm, but also when it comes to other skills, like you said, technology. I think if we look at the technology space, we're so ahead. We're so much happened also just in the last decade. It's insane when you look at the technology for industrial farming, or just generally the knowledge that there is about also drones, about like all these new machines and software and so on. But it is just focused on industrial farming. Yeah. But I think if we would take a few people and put them, I'm just using the examples from our farm, on a very diverse agroforestry system, and tell them our problem is that we don't know how to harvest these 5 different crops that we have in one row. There's sea buckthorn, there is blackberry, there is a tree that we want to use for wood. There's also different herbs, and we want to harvest all of this, but how can we do that by not having people manually do it? But how can we scale this up? And I think there's so many incredibly smart people in the world and so much technology, but we just need to bring these skill set and like different demands together. Of course, there's a huge lobby for industrial agriculture, so that's not so easy. That's why
I have more trust in that co-creation than in the I heard someone, she just left, but about decolonizing the hazelnut industry. I mean, there's also huge amounts of knowledge with a lot of indigenous people all over the world. So it's also about
I think most of the regenerative farming knowledge comes from that.
Yeah, but there's knowledge about everything there. So it's also about including not only like the new, but also the old.
Absolutely, yeah. Eli, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just felt like maybe this fits so well at the research stage where I work. There's also not the project that I work with, but there's research into really highly diversifying agriculture. It's called hedge cropping. So actually to look at with sensors, look at different areas of the soil and really say, okay, so then we have a 100-meter square here for soy, and then next to it 100 square meter rapeseed, because it just works really good. And that's something we learned this year. So if you look at an agricultural field, you will always see a lot of diversity in how well the crops are doing. So I think that's also very, for me, inspiring perspective, like how crazily diverse it is to diversify.
Yeah, and I think that comes so natural if we would look at that's why I hope that we wake up tomorrow realizing that that's a super natural state of being.
But then in this project there's also like my colleague works with robots, and so trying to figure out how to also manage these small kind of.
But I think that makes so much sense, because otherwise we will always have products that will not be achievable. It will be too expensive to feed the masses, if we have every berry.
Yeah, also depends on what you value. But true pricing is a different topic.
Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned Disney Plus and that you had a show and then you kind of made a face.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering what the impact has been of that, of having Disney come behind and say we support this and want to talk about regenerative agriculture.
Talking about systematic.
Have you noticed any changes since it was released, or what's been the conversation?
I think it's very hard to grasp, but maybe if somebody doesn't know, so there is documentary, or docutainment is the department, I think, about our farm, but generally about regenerative farming, and a lot of people kind of in the food world trying to change something. And this production company that worked for Disney Plus came to our farm kind of throughout a year for, I think, around 90 days of filming in total. And I cringed a little bit because it became a very dramatic, emotional soap opera series a little bit. But at the same time, I think why we did it is also it's a huge platform for regenerative farming. And I think it was a very difficult process for us to have them at the farm, because I think we both learned from both sides how a documentary in that way is produced, because I think we had to learn that not everything is just, okay, you do you and we film, but it's of course also that we have a storyline and we need to entertain people, and the way we reach people with something seen as boring as farming is through emotions. And that makes total sense to me. And at the same time, we also realize that they don't know that we work with nature. So if they had in the script, okay, today is harvest day, we're filming harvesting, and we're like, well, it's pouring rain, we're not going to harvest the grain today. So it was a very learning journey for both of us. And I think it's a huge privilege, and I think also responsibility to have this platform for this topic, and I think for that we're very, very grateful. It's still cringy for us to watch it, but we are thankful, and I think it's very difficult to pinpoint the impact it had on us, because there's also, of course, a lot of press work around it, and I personally think it's often more impact if my boss speaks at like a public television talk show or whatever, but I still think we get so many messages from people who just feel inspired to go into farming or just look it up, and I think that's the biggest compliment you can get, because I think that's really the main goal that we have with our work, also the book that we published, to just get people fascinated about it and get an emotional connection to farming and the people. And I have very good looking colleagues who are very passionate about what they're doing. And I think that is already, it's so motivating for young people to see someone who, I don't know, you remember Johannes from our tree nursery. He's such a cool dude, and he plants trees, and he does, it's just like, it's a role model. And I think to have a platform to show to all different kinds of people that these people can be role models, and they can listen to hip hop and be cool and be rappers, but also plant trees or grow trees. I think that's so amazing. And so, so I think
follow-up questions. You said you thought going on a talk show had more impact than a series did.
I mean, it's like, I also do the sales for our farm and run our online shop, and it was just, he went on like one NDR talk show, which is like one of our public TV stations, and it's one of the most seen talk shows from, I think mostly 50 plus people age-wise, and it was just like sales were like, whoop, were like up like that, and that's just like an immediate impact you can see. While with Disney, I think it's more, I mean, it's also a question, what is impact? And this was just like sales impact. But I think in that case, to have the impact of people writing to us, I am so happy that I read this, and I feel more joy in doing the work I already do. Or, I don't know, today I met my former boss, and he was like, my daughter wants to go into farming, maybe because she grew up in the market hall space, but also because maybe now there are role models, and she was confronted with them all her life. I think that's so beautiful. And I think talking about change and impact, of course we are in a capitalist structure, and I'm very annoyed by that, but it is what it is. But I also think that we are very much working towards this impact and change as well. And for that, so a series like this or different platforms on public TV are very valuable.
You mentioned that at least the film crew might have thought agriculture was boring, or something around that this industry is often perceived as boring.
Not the film company. I mean, they luckily understood that it was interesting. That's why they wanted to do the series. But
communication aspect, and I don't know if everyone else has a similar experience of, it's often not seen as sexy, or it's considered boring, or maybe because it's slow and it isn't like Harvest Days today. But just curious about that, how you made it sexy, or how, if it was that because it became a soap opera, it was there, or if there's another element. I haven't watched the show, so I don't.
Please do. Looking forward to your feedback. I mean, I think it's of course about storytelling, about creating experiences. I mean, Michael, for example, was part of one workshop we did at the farm, and we always try to show the farm, but also showcase the different people that work there. And I think just hearing their stories and their motivation why they work in the farming space, I think that's the best communication you can do, the best storytelling you can do. I mean, kind of growing up, like Joszi also said, like growing up with these amazing people that I also met at the right time and the right moment, like Frida, for example, who runs the association. I, of course, also very strongly believe in the gastronomy space and the power it has, and the way it's just ambassadors for us working in the farming scene. We also always try to create these culinary experiences and moments where you don't just tell people like organic food is more healthy and you should do something for the planet, but like have a taste of how delicious it is and how beautiful it can be to sit out in the field and to get a taste of this way of farming. I think that can also really make a change in the mindset of people. I think it's really very much about, we were talking in another conversation before about branding and how it works, and I think Dan, who was the other participant, said it's about the necessity of a product, so it has to taste good or it has to be necessary as a product, like fulfilling some primary need, and it has to be maybe convenient in a way, but also there has to be an emotional side to it. And I think that is very powerful. I don't know, how do you feel about that?
Now, I want to ask you what the response is from other regenerative farmers, because I guess you also sometimes need one, spokesperson for a certain farming sector. And that dairy farmer that I just mentioned is also really a spokesperson, but he's sharing what he learned and his whole new value chain with a real big group of other farmers who now also getting the value of his spokespersonship. So do you feel that this
I think
storytelling can help other regenerative farmers?
I hope so. I mean, I think we're definitely not there to tell people how it's done. We don't have all the solutions. We don't do like a lot of research and trial and error. And I hope we can, show people that farming is fun and maybe sexy also, like you said. But I mean, it's also, I think, what I always feel like it's not always easy to be such a big farm. So I think there's also definitely other farmers who have very different struggles finding land, for example. And I do see these struggles. So I think sometimes really, how to say this? I don't know if it's yet so much about regenerative farming, because I think it's also it's a not polarized term, but it's not defined what it is. I think it doesn't have to do anything with conventional or organic. It's a verb. Yeah. So I think we're more working towards generally showing that farmers, they deserve more appreciation. And I think we do regenerative farming, and we do try to show that soil is the base of all our life. We should ask other farmers. I don't know how they feel about the scene being viewed from the outside. I think there is still some conflict in between the farming scene, but yeah.
We do a lot of networking work in our group. So, for example, we have a lot of innovation projects and digitalization of food systems. And we ask those people, what subject are you interested in? Then they give us a lot of subjects, and then we make a nice workshop. We invite them to work in this workshop together on solutions. And then often you have a nice solution in the end. So, but I have often the feeling it is very hard, even if we pick the subjects that they gave to us, to motivate them to come, because they have never time. And when they come and be motivated to come and they sit there, then they often hold back. Because I think these are scientists and it's a group of companies, and then we have these two groups. They're very close and they want to keep their ideas to themselves. And this is the system we have. I understand this. And sometimes if it breaks up, we really have nice results, but very often you can feel that they hold back. So I would like to know, how do you do this?
Yeah. So we spend a lot of time in the beginning of our group process in team building, personal leadership, actually creating a safe space. And I think lots of people who start a program with us, they're like, okay, why do I have to talk about my motivations or how I am as a human, or we're going to create food solutions, right? What am I doing now? Why am I meditating, for example? That's just the start of our program. We often don't communicate it. So we just start. And I think the 20% at the end of our program is about solutions. That's actually the easiest part. It's really diverse. Most programs are 6 to 9 months. And we meet every month at least. Yeah, but it's really diverse. And of course you have the perfect conditions of a program with our Farmers Accelerator. We initiated it ourselves. We created the perfect conditions in our opinion. And sometimes, you just have one weekend and you try to do that in a smaller version. Yeah, and of course, if you have a long-term program, the solutions have more impact than after one weekend. Yeah.
And then in this context, you also kind of push the topic of diversity, that it's really important to create.
Yeah, so if possible, we always select the people that go into a group with us. Yeah.
That it's also kind of like the baseline, and you could communicate in a way that it's important to connect even though pretty diverse and don't hold back and kind of like feel the competition.
Yeah. No, so we start with system change. We start with the necessity for interdisciplinary relations and also diverse opinions, overcome polarization. Yeah.
And what is the question you give them in the beginning? So they have a special topic to work on, and how do you get to it?
It differs. So we ask them for their motivation, of course, before they begin. But we always start with, okay, who are you? Well, I'm la, and I work here. Okay, and where did you wake up this morning? And then you're already, I had to rush and I had to bring my children to school or whatever. Okay, and then now, why are you here? And so we're going deeper and deeper to a level that you're a group of humans and not, there with your own background. So but I have a lot of, learning by doing experience, and we now have some, we are trying to document it, some kind of working materials and stuff that I am very happy to share of how to do that with a group, because after so many years I think have the best so far way of doing that, and I hope that to grow more and more in that. And I would definitely look into Theory U if I were you, because I go back to that theory all the time of how Theory U. Yeah, the U letter. Yeah.
Wonderful. If there aren't any more questions, I think we also... Yeah, okay, Ili, no. Please.
But so that means that you are creating again the space of we, no? Like this would not be possible if it wasn't a prolonged time that this group went in. Like, probably wouldn't be possible to add someone else after a week, right?
No, we always try to, if people apply, we always say that you have to be there every day of the program. Mm-hmm. And of course, then sometimes something happens, but that's a really important start point.
Thank you so much also for being a we and for interacting so much. And I think just by looking backwards, just Die Gemeinschaft also built up in the last 5 years. I think we can see there's so much change happening on all different entities. And thank you very much for being part of this change. Thank you, Joszi, so much for your time and coming here.
Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you very much. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Looking forward to talk more with all of you. And see you later. Enjoy the coffee break, which is now. Yes.